So I actually was going to start with that, like the first kind of minute talking about that, but Emma's already done that. So I won't reintroduce them, won't reintroduce myself then, really. The talk, it's kind of titled Learnings from Navigating Open Data Scotland's Landscape. This was actually an idea suggested to me from a friend and collaborator. They suggested this because they thought, kind of, given our position, being able to see all these kind of data sets at the same time, the same place, they thought this would be a bit of a unique view into it. That friend also kind of suggested that maybe I could create a bit of a vision of, like, you know, navigating, sort of swimming in the murky depths of the Loch Ness. Like, I thought that was just a terrible idea. You know, gave me a good idea, but he also gave me a terrible idea. But, you know, I hope maybe there's a little bit of a mix. Maybe it's the kind of same thing here. There are some things that might be kind of interesting for you, but then also there may be some things that you just kind of already know. I don't think there's anything sort of new, but maybe there's some comfort in knowing that we're all kind of struggling in the same way. So that's kind of where we're at. So Open Data Scotland, does this work? Nope, it does not. There we go. It is a 100% volunteer-run community project, if you will. I'm going to call it that. There is no organization behind it. There is no company behind it. We try to make it look a little bit more professional than it actually probably is. It's just a few of us kind of running around in the back. But really, the kind of aim of it is to help people. Sorry about that. I'm playing down Jack's efforts here. Really, the kind of aim of it is to help people find open data better. And a lot of this is kind of driven by my own experiences personally of having to sort of find open data in my own sort of professional work, but also that of my peers, my colleagues, and also sort of my student peers when we were studying at that time. Having to look for open data for projects was just very difficult. A lot of it's kind of reliant on knowing other people who know where to get these data sets from. You kind of have to know who's actually publishing this data and then happen to know who to ask to then get the information. It's all kind of very convoluted in that sense. So we were just trying to bring it all together so it'd be easy for people to find, and it's very much a focus on Scottish data, local data. So, you know, if you were interested in sort of local aspects, that's probably where you would go to find it. So that's kind of one. We're pulling it all together, but we're also trying to help people understand what's in that landscape, what we have, what we don't have. How do you know what you don't have unless you have an assessment of what you have? So that's part of what we're doing as well. And not only just actually listing the data, but also the projects that then use the data. They need a bit of spotlight as well. What's the point of putting all this open data out if it's not actually being used? And if it's being used, we need to be talking about it and we need to be celebrating those things. So that's kind of, as a whole, what Open Data Scotland does. Now, it is a community, but we do have a kind of website front-end piece, if you will. So that's kind of where all these different things come in. I'm very technical in my terms today. I do apologize for that. So this is how we kind of lay out. Bearing in mind that we are, if you kind of see the publishers at one end and your sort of public users, people kind of on the street, if you will, we kind of sit in the middle of that, we hope. Where we've got a group of people who are technically competent, know how to work with this data, know how to create good products for end users to consume. But we also recognize that there are people who maybe have community interests who are going to be using this website. So this is kind of created for them, if you will. So I kind of touched on this a little bit, but the early motivations for us building this was really around, like I said, from peers, sort of personal experience of having to find data yourself. I saw a few nodding heads, so that already is kind of like, I know we're in the right place. You already know this. You already know it's kind of challenging to find. Even though you know where to go, it still takes a bit of time to go into the website to figure out whether it's there. A lot of times they don't call it open data. Sometimes they don't even call it data. They just kind of list stuff and hope you find it and hope you understand it. And when a lot of our sort of early beginnings with Open Data Scotland were kind of, we hang around a lot of hackathons. That's what Code the City does. And very often we have these little proof of concept projects that may come up and they want to build something, but they don't know where to get the data from. It's a bit of having to, where's my head at? Having to ask people if they know of any source of that data. But then also when we get together in those hacking spaces, we tend to then make the same complaints every time about how data is difficult to find, difficult to sort of understand, and difficult to get. So that's really the kind of early motivation for this. We were a little bit tired of having to complain about the same things all the time, so we thought, why not we try and build something out of this. Now, initially when I built this, when I titled this slide, I call it the problems we were trying to solve. But I felt a little bit negative framing, one, but also the idea that we would solve it was a bit of a bold statement. It's more about trying to alleviate the pain of it rather than actually outright being able to solve it. But that is certainly what we were kind of starting off with. But now we kind of continue it because we've got a very strong community interest, we've got the skills to maintain it, but also we have a lot of free time. So this is what we're doing. Right, it is very much a public service for a community, built by community, sorry. Started around May 2021, so it's been about a year and a half, coming up to 2 years now. And really the core of it has been built over 5 weekend hackathons. And then sort of maintenance, so these hackathons kind of happen every quarter. So every 3 months, and in between we'll do a little bit of maintenance, build a bit more, but really it's kind of been there. Won't try and read the rest of it, but it's a very small core maintainer team, and we have people kind of jumping in and out, doing little bits of development. Either they build a feature or they see an interesting bug, they see a challenge, they kind of jump in and do that. And this is one of the great things about us being the community build as well, and not being an organization behind it, is we have an environment where we can encourage people, learners, beginners, students to come in and try a little bit. Might be their first time actually working in a collaborative environment. A lot of them are actually setting up the GitHub accounts when they're sitting with us. So that's the kind of level we're working at there. And it's great that we can build this for them. A lot of our core features, are built by these students at local universities. So what's that kind of left us with then? So we now have, this is just a screenshot of our kind of main dataset listing. It is, my tagline is it's 1,500 plus datasets, which is the largest collection of open datasets for Scotland that we know of. I've been saying this for about 5 months now. Nobody has come and told me that I'm wrong. So I believe this is true. One thing I am going to cover here is we don't host any of the datasets. The datasets are hosted by the original publishers. We don't move that around. What we do is basically pull the metadata, we list the metadata. We are effectively a redirection service, if you will. So find your dataset, go to the place, and then do what you want to do with it. All these datasets come from about 30 plus publishers. So we started off with local authorities. This was the original concept when we started our first hack. Just local authorities in Scotland, and it's a nice little set because we're lucky enough in Scotland that we've got 32 of them. It's kind of big enough to be a challenge, small enough to actually be manageable, right? You believe that? And it's complete. It's a complete set. That was the most important thing as well, because we could see where it started and where it ended. And now once we had these 32, we could see what was missing. We then started to add more on. So then you start to see Cycling Scotland, National Library Scotland, all these other pieces that we've got. This is by no means complete. And the ones on your right are ones that we've identified that are publishing open data, and we are going to add to the listing. It does take a bit of time. If they have APIs, it's great, it's very fast. A lot of them don't have APIs. So they are static pages, and we have to web scrape them, and building the scraper takes a lot of time. And you understand why these students kind of join us and then hate us and then never stay on in that sense. Right, so this is kind of how we build all of it. I'm not going to talk too much about it. I've mentioned the APIs. We have 5 APIs that we kind of call from. SOOCon, ArcGIS, USmart, DCAT is not on there, and a Sparkle query as well. And then the other 5 are the sort of web scrapers that we've got. I'm not going to cover too much of this because my colleague Jack, who is winner of the Young Persons category at the Open UK Awards last year for his work on Open Data Scotland and other pieces as well. He's going to have a talk at 2:30 talking about the technology behind this, or how we kind of build this up. So I'm not going to take that from him. But what I will point out is that this is on a pipeline. It refreshes every Friday automatically. We don't get involved in that. Well, if it fails, we do. But it runs automatically, and that means we know every Friday we've got an updated listing. And this was very important to us because previous attempts have kind of made static lists and then never updated it. All that good effort, and then it just ages really quickly. So when we do this, and that's kind of why we were building web scrapers, we know that every Friday we've got that. Now, what that gives us as well is visibility over movement in open data in Scotland. what's being added, what's being modified, what's being removed. This is all visibility that we didn't have before. Right. It is a bit mad, I'm not going to lie, to try and want to do this. It's a bit messy. It's also a bit like, why would you bother? But the kind of approach we've taken is just to put it all into one place. We centrally process it, do all the cleaning, sort of categorization, anything we need to do to standardize it, and then we format it for laying out, listing on the actual website itself. So there is a bit of transformation going on here, but I'm going to remind everyone again, it's just metadata, not the data itself. So these are things like titles, who's published it, who's owned it, when was it created, when was it last updated, are there any categories, are there any descriptions, that kind of stuff. So what's going to follow is some of the stuff that we've seen when we've tried to put this together. And again, this is just purely metadata. Some of you might not enjoy the next few slides because it might be quite horrific. But some of the challenges that we've seen, obviously inconsistency is a big one. We talk about it all the time. Across different publishers, but also within the same publisher. They're not consistent themselves when they publish stuff. And that could be quite interesting to see. You get a little bit of an insight to how that organization operates, right? So you've got that. You've got cases where either some metadata doesn't exist across all the different publishers, or it exists but it's in a different field, or they use different fields differently for different reasons, and having to sort of coordinate all of that. And other bizarre things, such as an unlimited array of tabs. This actually goes on for much longer. The actual thing is much, much, much longer. And the worst part of it is there's text in between as well, nested in between. So you actually have to extract it out. This is interesting. Also, we see a lot of HTML tags, you can see it's kind of been pulled out of a site, if you will, and put there. And this, for us, it's funny. On the scale of irritating to infuriating, this is just funny. And we're able to do something with it, but you can imagine for someone who's like new to it, they're like, what is that? They don't know how to deal with that. It's not a major problem. We can deal with this. That's fine. Other things that were quite interesting, for example, this broke our pipeline in December. When this organization published this data set, and what they did was, for the first time ever, they decided to put a year tag here, but not encase it in strings. It was just a number. And kind of our fault for not being able to handle that, but also this hasn't happened before, so why did it suddenly come up, right? So changes to the way organizations are kind of posting their metadata also kind of is interesting to look at. Other things here. So this is SIMD data, Scottish Index Multiple Deprivation. Doesn't come out very often. But what happened here was the date issued piece is missing the date. It's just the time. So what happened in our pipeline was it was filling in the date. It was assuming the date was today, the day the pipeline was run. So we were seeing I talked about the monitoring piece, right? We can see whether data sets are being added or modified or deleted. What was happening was this kept getting counted as being updated every week, even though this doesn't get updated for years at a time. So that should have been the first indicator, but wasn't really paying that much attention to it, if I'm very honest. But it's interesting stuff like that. So this is also another example of inconsistency within the same sort of publisher, because if you look at any of the other data sets that Scottish Government publish, this is the only one with a date problem. The rest of them have got dates. It's no bother. So I don't know how they kind of do that. Very interesting problems to have. Another one we have is file names. Okay, so it's so small. I really do apologize for that. So these are snippets of our listing, our site, if you will. And you see these are the names of the files. So you can see what you're going to download for 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, all that. But sometimes there is no file name information because that hasn't been provided by the publisher. So when we don't have that, the best we can do is just fill it in with the file name, file type, sorry. In this case, this is a great example because you can see it's actually just the same data in different formats, so it's kind of easy to recognize. But there are some cases where it just says zip and zip, or CSV, 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 all the way down, and it's impossible to read. We can't really do anything with that Probably could, actually, that's probably a lie. We would have to, but that would mean we would have to open up the file and extract that information from file, whereas at the moment, we're trying to make it very lightweight by not doing that. So, not great, but there are workarounds. It's totally fine. That was the kind of the last of the horrors, if you will. So we're starting to wrap up now. Am I good for time? Oh, no, I'm not good for time. Okay, static pages. So I've been complaining about APIs, but we've got a lot of problems with static pages as well. This is one publisher. This is the file. And you have to kind of extract the date that was updated from the file name. There's some sort of, there's no description. There's no nothing else, and the license is kind of here. This is another one, SQA. What you don't see is before this, there's a little drop down to select what year you want it for. So they publish in kind of year chunks. And then this one is National Library Scotland, and they have different download buttons for different data sets, and they're all called something different. So having to find them is difficult. But also, what happened was one time, it must have been their web admin or whatever, decided to change the style of the sheet, and it broke our pipeline because we were looking for the buttons, but the buttons didn't exist anymore. So that's all fun. I'll just kind of wrap that up. Not really kind of wrap it up, but summarize it a bit more. So I've pointed out all the different things that we've had problems with. One interesting thing that I'd never considered before having to do this was deciding or defining what a data set is. And this comes about, I mean, is it really important? Probably not in the grand scheme of things. But when you are starting to try and build an understanding of what you've got and you want to compare or have an understanding of whether or not some publishers are publishing more than others, then maybe the definition of a data set might be important because you want to be comparing apples to apples. So here, for example, SQA, they publish one data set every year because they get a new, this is the qualifications people, exam results and stuff like that. So they get exam results every year. It makes sense for them to be publishing in year batches. But then look at PHS, Public Health Scotland. They've got updates every month. So should this, their style of creating data sets is quite different from SQA style. So this is what we're starting to see as well. So do we need to kind of align it? Do we? Maybe? Don't know. But that's a question I've postponed for a bit until we need. Categories, one interesting thing is some publishers, they tag their data sets. But these are an example of the tags that we get raw from the data set. And we do end up having to convert our own. So these are the ones that we have now. And the reason for that is because these data sets, these categories, I'm sure made sense in the context of the original portal. They don't make so much sense combined with all the other sources as well. So there is a little bit of treatment for that. Licenses. Okay. Same information, ordered differently, so you can see two things that I'm going to point out. One, you can see volume on this side, but it's the same number of licenses. Here, what I'm trying to show you is where we've got slight variations on something. So you've got Creative Commons up there, you've got open government licenses down here, for example. So you can see some sort of variation. Now, those of you who are quite eagle-eyed would see that there are some closed data sets in there, or licensed as closed. How they got in, don't really know. They're sitting in open data portals that kind of are publishing open data portals, so there is a bit of a mix as well. Kind of have to suggest to users to consider what they're using anyway when they open it up, but maybe for us as well, we have to consider removing it because it's not actually open data. What I was showing you before was like 15 different categories, and that's already treated. This is what comes in untreated, which is fun. It's a lot of, in fact, I'm just going to point out, open government license, another one there, and then there's like some here as well, and another one here. All different variations of doing the same thing. I don't think I've got time for this, but I was going to show this very quickly. One of the things we built into the project very early on, that's not true, we did in March last year, was site analytics. And I think, to me, it's one of the best things we've done because we now have visibility as well of who's actually using this and also what's popular. Now, before we put site analytics in, I thought if 30 to 40 people use this website, I'd be very happy and it's a job well done. And now we're seeing 700 people use the site every month. Now, it's not anywhere near Wikipedia's numbers, obviously, but it's a lot more than I probably would have expected. What I was bringing up there, it's so tiny, I'm so sorry. What I was bringing up there was most popular pages as well. So we can actually see what data sites are the most popular. And this one, that is the most popular, besides all the other major listings, is HMO licenses for Glasgow Council, which is housing multiple occupation. Sorry, I'm probably not saying that right. Which, if you look up in our main site, Glasgow is the only one to publish, and one sort of general Scottish Government one. So they're the only ones actually publishing this, that we're only ones publishing this. We're pulling from everyone, so it's not here, it's probably not, they're probably not publishing it. So there's an interesting question of, here, we can see what's popular, but what can't we see that people are looking for that we have no visibility of? That's what's really interesting. Is there anything to say here that if the other councils started publishing the same thing, would they also be popular? So these are the kind of questions and feedback we'll probably want to send back to publishers, if you will. Probably we'll end it there. Yes, absolutely.
We've probably got time for one, maybe two, if we're lucky. So, does anybody have a question over here?
Hi, thank you. That was a fascinating talk. How much feedback do you give to publishers, for example, when their date times are screwed up? Do you let them know, and are they happy to be told?
So there's a bit of a mix. I try, but again, this is kind of, it's admin that sits on top of it. We try and send it back. We have been good at tweeting them. And interestingly enough, because of the pipeline, so we monitor when it's down before the pipeline runs. And when that's down, when some sites are down, we're alerted to that being down beforehand. So we have then kind of acted on that, gone back to these publishers, and two of them went down in the same week, which is very interesting. And we sent feedback back, and they kind of then started working on it. One interesting conversation with one of them was, they said to us, thanks for letting us know. Because of that, I met them at a conference a couple of weeks later. They said, thanks for letting us know. We kind of started that process of bringing the site back up. But I didn't know what the Twitter etiquette was, so I didn't know whether to say thanks or no thanks. So that was kind of where it was at. So there is some engagement. There are some organizations, especially individuals in those organizations, who are very good at engaging with us. They see us posting, they share, they like the fact that they're being tagged in it. We do a weekly update, they do that. But in terms of kind of formal feedback, we have sent some back, and it's just been a bit slow, naturally, but we try and do that. Yes.
Great. One more very quick one, and then we'll have to
Brilliant.
close.
Really interesting. Thank you. To what extent do you share that kind of the data set of data sets that's regional with larger, let's say, data sets that are out there? Are you passing that on to other groups?
No.
Okay.
We've been talking about having an API interface. So the data is available as a JSON file, you can download it. We don't have the interface yet. It's in our plan to do it. If you go onto our site and you eventually navigate away to our plans, all our project plans and work all there, it is planned for Q3 this year, I'm pretty sure it is. That's where I put it in. So that's it. So no, but soon, yes.
Great. Thank you so
Thanks very much.
That's been absolutely brilliant.